Hallöchen, everybody. It's me again, Rafi, your content and community manager from Aerosoft. And today we are in part 3 of our Airbus A340-600 Pro series. And with me together is again Torsten. Hello, Torsten.
Hi, Rafi. How's it going?
I am doing very good. I hope you too. We have a lot of work back in the last weeks done in terms of development because I'm also part of, let's say, the development course. So it's very interesting what is coming along. And today we want to do the last or maybe the third part of the deep dive series. So that's an interview with you. We did like 2 parts already. If you missed them, just find them somewhere here linked and make sure you see them before, because today we want to go like in a short way about the rest of the overhead cockpit part, and then we go straight into some systems here and there. So last time we were talking about the fuel and electric systems. There's one big system left, and that's, or let's say 2 systems left. Is it right? Maybe hydraulics and air. Guide us through a little bit through these systems in as short as possible, but as deep as possible.
Yeah, okay, short and deep. That's interesting. So let's start with the hydraulics. Maybe the hydraulics on the 340-600 are actually very, very similar. If you know the 330 already, or another like a shorter, older version of the 340. It's as all the older Airbuses, it's it has 3 different systems. And each engine has 1 pump in this case, but that's a bit strange because you have 4 engines, you have only 3 systems. So what did Airbus do? They ended up with the outboard engines both feeding the same system, the green one, which is the one that does really most of the heavy loading. It has like the landing gear retraction, it has flaps, it has all the main surfaces, and it also has the ram air turbine. So for that famous scenario where you lose all your engines or all your hydraulic pumps or whatever, then the ram air turbine comes out, and that one still feeds the green system, so that you still have at least basic flight controls available in order to still control the airplane. And what was interesting coming from the single aisle for the 340 was this concept that you have actually a total of 3 pumps on 1 system. And like that, we had to augment the system that we had developed for the single aisle such that it's able to properly distribute which of these pumps is doing how much of the hydraulic flow. So we calculate the hydraulic flow that is currently being used based on how the surfaces move and how the landing gear moves, etc. So we know exactly, okay, this is the consumption of hydraulics of this aircraft, and then we need to see which of the pumps is providing how much of this flow, in order to see, is the pump still at the level of how much flow it can provide, or is the flow required beyond the capacity of the pump? And if it is beyond the capacity of the pump, the pressure drops. You'll never ever see this running on the engine-driven pumps because those have power far beyond what's needed. However, if you ever find yourself on the ram air turbine and then you try to, let's say, move the flaps and you forget to use gravity extension for the landing gear, but try the regular extension, well, then you're gonna see the pressure drop dramatically. So because the ram air turbine does not have that much capacity, and actually the capacity of the ram air turbine does depend on the aircraft speed in our case too. So if you're flying fast enough, it can pump a lot more liquid than if you're close to landing and you're really like around 160, 170 knots, then the ram air turbine really doesn't do a lot.
All right, so this reflects on in slower movement of, let's say, the gear, for example, etc., all this stuff, or is this just that then some systems are probably not working, or how do I see as a pilot the difference between a, let's say, ram air low pressure authorized hydraulic system and between a general, let's say, working system?
Well, you would notice the flaps are starting to move slower, for example, if the pressure drops. But honestly, in the real life as a pilot, you don't want to get there, because if you get to the stage that you're on the ram air turbine and the pressure on the ram air turbine can't supply its nominal pressure, that's basically the point where the shit is at the fan, because you're probably going to lose control at some point because your control surfaces won't do anymore what you want them to. So yeah, you don't want to get there.
Okay, that makes sense, right? So, I mean, I have seen, every aircraft is like complexly built in terms of, especially on redundancy, the word I can. How do you say that again? Redundancy. Redundancy, that's the word. Thank you. That was last time also I was missing. But I have seen like an A340 scheme where you have seen, okay, this, for example, yellow, blue, green, whatever system is, for, let's say, this outer slats, and for the 3 inner spoilers here and there on the left-hand side, the inner, outer, whatever I say now not correctly, but it's interesting to see how complex the system itself is. And so this is all simulated here, right?
Yeah, this is all simulated, and it's actually a very interesting thing when you look into it, how they have the systems assigned. You can see that there's actually a correlation between which actuator gets which hydraulic and the electrical supply behind it. So you really have it basically a left system, system 1, a right system, system 2, and then the essential system. And the idea is really that the airplane, after loss of 2 of these 3 systems, still has 1 available. So they make sure that those actuators that can run on the red are controlled by computers that are also powered when operating on the red, so that are powered on the emergency generator. And this is actually a big part of, if I go back to my pre-Tourist life, I actually did these types of activities at Bombardier on how designing the different systems, making sure that hydraulics, electrics, fly-by-wire, and all the systems are aligned so that you have this redundancy like that you don't kill part of a system due to the loss of another system.
Okay, makes sense. I mean, in the real world, you want to be as safe as possible. So let's switch to the air system. And I hope the air system is less complex to explain, because, I mean, we just were on the surface, right, with the hydraulics, even with fuel and electrics. I mean, we could go even more deep dive into it, right? But we try to keep it as compact as possible. So let's focus on the air system. Is this easy? Let's say, is this easy in this aircraft?
Well, from an operational point of view, the air system is pretty much fully automatic, like all other systems. From a development point of view, the bleed system also again had a speciality compared to the airplanes I did before the 340, because now we have 4 engines instead of 2. But the bleed system still only has one, a left and a right system. So what's happening now is that you have 2 engines feeding the left system and 2 engines feeding the right system. So there we were a bit in the same situation as with the hydraulic system. I had to augment the system such that it now can determine, okay, this is the amount of bleed air I'm taking from engine 2, this is the amount of bleed air I'm taking from engine 1, etc., because that affects the fuel flow of the engine. The more bleed air I take, the higher my fuel flow gets on that particular engine, because I'm taking some of the air that got nicely compressed by the compressor, and instead of producing thrust, I'm producing bleed air. So on those things we also simulate. So again, I had to get to this thing of, before I had 1 supplier for 1 system. So that was easy. Okay, everything that's used by the system comes from this engine. Now I had to find how do I distribute it between the engines, especially if the engines are not running at the same speed. For example, you've lost an engine, then during this cool down already, we already consider the effect that the bleed air coming from that engine then goes down until the engine finally fails and doesn't provide any bleed air anymore at all.
Of course. Yeah. So, I mean, one little thing you just mentioned in your sentences was if the engine is operating in different speeds or whatever states, let's say this way, that's a cool part, because I noticed this during my test flights here and there, that the engines, I would say, they have their own life. So this is not like straight one number for every engine, like if you see the oil, temperature, usage, whatever it is, right? So you see, this is, I mean, that's as is in the real world. Okay, there you have even more stuff coming in, like newer engine, older engine, whatever it is, right? But here you have also the same thing. You see the numbers are like, moving a little bit different. Some is going more up, some is going less down, like temperature, oil pressure, oil level, etc. So you could say the aircraft is like in its own environment alive for each engine, right?
Yeah, well, this is why it is an important difference between what you often see in simulation, what happens in real life. In real life, you can have an airplane where you have a 1-year-old engine under one wing, a 10-year-old engine under the other wing, depending on when the last engine replacement was. And so each engine has its own, even if they're the same age, they all have their own production tolerances, so they're all not going to provide the exact same values. And yes, we tried to simulate that, and that then becomes, for things like oil pressure, it's just, okay, you say, okay, this one has more oil pressure than the other. But then when it comes to systems that react with the rest of the airplane, like bleed or hydraulic or electric, that's where it then becomes interesting, because we really try to have these downstream effects too. That then makes it that if you switch off, like say you switch off the bleed air of engine 2, you'll see that the fuel consumption of engine 2 is going down a little bit, and then the fuel consumption of engine 1 most likely goes up, because it suddenly has to provide more bleed air, because it has to cover for the loss or for the fact that engine 2 is not doing anything anymore.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, those are interesting, very interesting in the development. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's why, especially, I mean, if you have 2 engines, then it's more important. But even on 4 engines, the same. That's why you do during takeoff, you do just the initially whatever percentage, let's say 40, 50, depends on aircraft, spool up, right? Because if an aircraft engine is older or new or whatever, it takes different times. And if you go like straight into full power, then it can happen that you turn left or right into the grass, right? Because the different engines are working differently. So this is a nice thing to hear that this is simulated here, right? So with the different, like say, engine states you have, basically.
Yeah, that's something we made sure to have in too. That the interesting thing with jet engines is like when you try to get them out of idle, like the first 3% of N1, they take like half of the time. So they take probably 3-4 seconds, and we've made it such that all engines have a slightly different time to get out of this. This is a random function. So you may have a flight where the engines accelerate almost the same, but then on another day, you may end up with a scenario where engine 1 accelerates relatively much faster. And that's, as you said, that's why it's important to stabilize the engines at a low thrust setting, but outside idle before you give full thrust, because once you're at like 40-50% N1, if you then move the levers forward, you can be pretty sure all engines accelerate at the same speed. But this thing of getting out of the idle at the bottom, that's really what takes time. And that's where the engines can accelerate at different rates. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Sounds awesome. That all of this is included in a big airliner, right? I would say even finally, right? So this is good to hear. And we have a lot of more systems on the overhead, of course. Yeah. But I would say these are basically less used during daily operations. In best case, I mean, there are here and there some buttons. I know they are also interesting, but I would just go in the, let's say, the middle part of the overhead, because this is let's say more A340 specific thing. Talking about the A340 specific, in its sheer size, they introduced back in the day a kind of feature taxi cam. I will come to this later in this video, so I don't forget this in this video to mention later on how you guys made it working. But we will come back to this later. I would like to keep it quick and focus on two things. First thing is we have 3 MCDUs working, right? So independently from each other. Why you did that? That would be an interesting thing. So because, I mean, are there really 3 needed? Let's say it this way. And the EFB, I want also to mention in a few sentences later. But let's first focus on the 3 MCDUs.
Well, the question why I did that is very simple, because a real airplane has it. I mean, there's not much more to it than that. However, just to make sure that the function of the real system is clear to our users also, is that even though you have 3 MCDUs, even in the real airplane, only 2 can be logged into the FMGS at any point in time. So if you have already the FMS on the captain MCDU and the FMS on the co-pilot MCDU, the third one won't be able to do the FMS, but it can do the upzoom. So that's a bit the idea, I think, why Airbus put the third one in, because often you have a 3-people crew. So you have one person sitting behind the pedestal on the jump seat, and that person could then, for example, assist the crew in the front by doing all the upzoom functionality. And but let's say you fail one of the forward MCDUs, or you simply turn it off via the bright button, then you will see that the rear MCDU, the third MCDU, is then capable of logging into the FMS on that side on which you turned off the other MCDU. So, and then let's say if you are now in that situation that you have the captain MCDU on FMS and the third MCDU on the co-pilot FMS, if you switch the co-pilot MCDU back on, in that case, that one would then not allow you to get onto the FM until you log the third MCDU out of it.
Of course, this is simulated. I mean, it sounds like easy, like you're telling us this, but I love it. I mean, the same applies, of course, to the displays. Yeah, when you switch one off, then it's transferring here and there the data. If you, for example, lost one display, that's, I guess we all expect and we don't need to talk about, right?
Well, no, I mean, that's this is standard functionality. I don't know, but there's actually only one. Well, there's a couple of automatic reconfigurations. If you lose the PFD on one of the sides, what's going to happen is that navigation display is automatically going to become the PFD. But you have a button on the left side of the panel where you can then switch it. So if you say, okay, I want to see the ND now, you can switch between the two. You could also, if both display units are functional, you can toggle them. So you can say, I want to have my PFD on the right, my ND on the left. Other options, other things that are possible, you can move the ECAM to one of the NDs. So that's another real life possibility. So let's say you've lost your central ECAM, so the engine warning display. Then you can use a switch in order to put the engine warning display onto one of the two navigation displays, for example. But it's not possible, and it's not possible in the real life either. You cannot have the PFD or the ND on the central units, for example. That is not supported by Airbus, and respectively, we don't support that either.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. If there is something that we can say general, right? So if there is something which is not working in the real aircraft, it won't be working here as well, right? So was the main focus. Back in the days, Tolis is always doing, right? And it's going to be influenced here in the same way in this Aerosoft A340-600 Pro. I just wanted to, the EFB, we could talk like hours about the EFB only because it's very complex. There are a lot of stuff included, like of course Navigraph, like takeoff landing performance, like states of the aircraft, like failures, like whatever. Maybe could you give us like in, let's say 10 sentences, that's the limitation for you, what are the main key facts about the EFB, and what to expect, and just give us a glimpse, deep dive, let's say this way.
Okay, so the EFB is gonna be the central point for interacting with the simulation. So we've integrated what an X-plane is our ISCS, or the Interactive Simulation Control System. We integrated that into the EFB. So if you wanna change the loading of the aircraft or we have simple ground services where you can just simply switch on external power, etc. If you don't wanna use add-ons like GSX or something like that. You can do all of that through the EFB. One big feature in there is going to be the situation safe load. So you are able to, if you're with the airplane somewhere and you want to continue the flight another day, you can just say safe situation. You shut down your computer, you come back the next day and you load that situation again. That's going to give you the airplane in the exact same condition with the flight plan loaded, with everything exactly the way you left it. So that is.
Can I add something here? Sorry for interrupting you, because that's the Atlantic. One thing I want to mention here, this is so fine into details. It works flawlessly. It works really perfect. And even if you have pushed your chrono during departure, so the chrono time, which runs down on your nav display, is exactly at the same time like it was. That's not really worth to mention, right? But that's what I wanted to say, is just going straight into details. You are perfectly at the point, at the same angle, at the same situation like you have been. It makes easy. So if you're tired in the evening and you don't want to fly, because we all did overnighters back in the days, right? Or still doing it. But as a real pilot, you need to be in charge of the planes. So the overnighters in the futures look like click save situation, wake up in the morning and continue your flight from there on. And then you have all things set up and it's working really, really nice. So sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I wanted just to mention that this feature is really working perfect. Let's say this way.
Yeah, and it also has an autosave function, right? So if, God forbid, Microsoft Flight Simulator should crash at some point during your flight, you will be able to pick up you can set the interval. I normally set it to 5 minutes. So if this happens, then you can pick up your flight within the last 5 minutes before the crash occurred somewhere. You mentioned Navigraph earlier. This is something that people who know the Tolis are not used to, because on X-plane we're using the Avitab plugin in order to have Navigraph integration up to now. For MSFS, we developed our complete own Navigraph solution. So it's you can go into the EFB, you can log into Navigraph through the EFB, and then what's gonna happen is, first of all, you get access to charts and to en route maps. The en route maps, if you download a sim brief plan through the MCDU, the en route map will actually show your original flight plan on the en route map, like it does in the real EFB also. And it also automatically downloads your FMS data. So the FMS data are gonna be up to date automatically as soon as you log into Navigraph. Download takes, depending on the internet speed, can take 2-3 minutes. So if you start the airplane, you log in the first time, you'll still be on the standard database. But then once it downloaded, you'll see in the MCDU on the status page that suddenly your secondary database appears with the new downloaded database. And then if you haven't started entering your flight plan yet, you can just simply change to that and then enter your flight plan. If you have already entered your flight plan and you want to switch, you can do it. But as in real life, if you switch database, your flight plan gets cleared.
Unfortunately, but I mean, as real as it gets, that's what we want to expect. And yeah, one last thing is like you can then set up like sound levels, joystick action. So let's say the calibration process, settings, etc. So all the, let's say with the accounts, third-party accounts, like correct me if I'm wrong, SimBrief, of course. Hoppy, I guess, is also included. I don't remember correctly.
We have Hoppy, yeah. We have Hoppy, CPDLC, and SimBrief. So
these are these two, and yeah, as I mentioned before, like takeoff and landing performance, which is crucial, of course, if you want to know where you end up during departure, if it's enough runway or not, and same for the landing, right?
Yeah, so you have the EFB basically has two portions. There's the top portion, which is functions you find in a real life EFB, and then you have the lower ones, which are our simulation control, which are things that are not possible with a real life EFB because you can't open doors with the EFB normally. But the performance calculators you have actually for takeoff, especially, you have actually two options. You can use the visual performance calculator in the EFB, but then you have to transfer the data to the MCDU yourself. Or if you have a Hoppy, I don't remember, it's Hoppy or SimBrief, one of the two logins needs to be in, then you can also use the perf page of the MCDU, and there you can use the takeoff performance uplink feature. So there you can also just say, okay, you go to the takeoff performance page, you go to uplink, and then you put in all your parameters that you want for your takeoff computation, you did it, and then you get the performance data straight into the MCDU from where you can then insert them straight into that performance page. So those two options are possible for that.
That sounds good. I mean, I guess it's going to be SimBrief because they have this calculation function, but I don't want to blame you here. We will find out, or we will correct it, or we will write it maybe down in the comments section, which is the thing we're like talking about, which is obviously not important yet, but yeah, you will see then. Right. So one last thing, I mean, that was a very quick glimpse into the EFB, is, as I mentioned before, the taxi cam, because this was, I don't know, there were so many people like excited. Hey, what's going on? You are the first guys who are able to show a taxi cam. So first things first, I want to mention before, I mean, we hit the same limitation like every other developer, right? So, and the solution we found is not a 100% perfect solution where we say, hey, look, this is the state of the art, that's the taxi cam you never seen, that's what we wanted to show you, and that's wow, top level. No, we found a little solution, a little glitch. I mean, you maybe know it if you used like the 787 default aircraft. When you zoom in, then you see a ground layout, for example. So there is kind of, let's say, reference material, and these kind of ground maps then we can use and translate them into the taxi cam. It's not 100% accurate. It's not 100% like the, let's say, real taxi cam is working, especially if you have different sceneries. This could be an issue, but we want to be clear on that. We implemented it anyways because we thought, okay, it's worth it, and it's a kind of help, and it is for the immersion a big plus at the end. So did I said something wrong, or is it correct?
I think that pretty much sums it up, right? So you are, in X-Plane, we have limitations with the taxi camera too, although the X-Plane camera does have the advantage that it actually shows the scenery that you're in, whereas in MSFS, the function that we use shows the satellite image of that area, and it places it where the aircraft is. And then we took the time to make sure that the way we put that image into the TFD or the SD, that we calibrate the aircraft that we lay over it, that the positions actually match. But now literally how good the taxi camera is in the airport that you fly depends on the quality of the Bing map in that airport. So if you have a high quality Bing map area, then you're gonna see a detailed image that also has the taxi lines and everything. If it's a low resolution picture, then it's gonna be a low resolution and the taxi cam also at this point.
Then it's just a dirty taxi cam, let's say this way, right?
So yeah, we need to, taxiing the airplane is an interesting challenge, but I think in the airport that I tested, I could use it to actually determine the rule that you normally, how a real life pilot explained it to me is, you have on the top camera where the nose landing gears, you have these two little purple squares left and right. And basically you wait until the taxi line that turns the direction where you want to go hits that square. And then once it hits that square, then you initiate your turn. And so on, if the image is good enough to show the taxi line, then it fulfills that purpose perfectly, that it assists you in knowing when to start the turn.
Okay, so that's the technique behind the magic. I mean, we still would love from Microsoft/Aerosoft side something natively, which would be done improving this system. But for the time being, as you said, I mean, I tested it also from here and there, and it was, for me, it was like good enough. Let's say this way, right? So it's nothing more to say on this point, I would rather guess. So, all right. So this sums up our interview series with you, Thorsten. I will give you now the final words to you. The last thing I want to say now is thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it very much, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Write us down in the comments your thoughts about this project. We love it, by the way, all the comments you did writing us on different platforms. Don't forget to come over our Discord, our Aerosoft official Discord, because there you get the news as first and as fast as possible. And one little thing, because as I said, this little series is ending with the words in a few minutes or a few seconds from Thorsten, is we are having a lot of different content planned as well on top. So one will be, I can announce this already, will be a live stream where Thorsten will be in a real A340-600 pilot. And yeah, we will do a basically showcase of the aircraft. That's gonna be later down the line. So just follow on our Discord, then you will know when what's happening. And yeah, so thanks for watching. And Thorsten, your final words.
Well, thanks for doing the series. It was a big pleasure, and I'm really glad you got to work on this project. I think it's gonna be an awesome product when it's finished. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this in all of your hands. Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.